What a gift this is to have this BIPOC space. EBMC is my first true Dharma home, really. And I'd also like to call into the room the name of my beloved mentor, Larry Yang, who ushered me into the Dharma in a very deep, caring, accepting way. I want to thank you all for this place of belonging. This moment allows me to be with you in an undefended way, open and vulnerable, and to experience vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a shield and a power. Thank you for this gift. I'd like to take the temperature of the room. And before I begin my sharing, my offering, I won't even call it a talk or a teaching, and to invite you to offer what you're bringing, really what you're bringing into this moment right here with all of us. So if you could pop that in the chat, I'd be so grateful. An open heart, gratitude, love, exhaustion, heartache, curiosity, gratitude and wisdom, openness, acceptance, a beginner's mind, tiredness, worry, gratitude, fatigue, grief, frustration, connecting energy, tender-hearted vulnerability, curiosity in the face of uncertainty, anxiety, sadness, loving awareness, presence and attention, hope, peace, grief and gratitude. Yeah. Thank you. Interconnectedness, back body breathing, soma, poetic, all of the above. My vulnerability of dealing with a concussion. Thank you for sharing that. May we all hold you in healing fully and rapidly. Empathy and gratitude. Yeah. We have a mixture of things that are showing up in the room. I am bringing, today I was really having a hard time. I had a meeting with one of the core teachers of EBMC, and the safety of that interaction allowed what was up under the surface of my heart to show up. And I was a little worried about how I would be this evening, not wanting to be a Debbie Downer. But I'm feeling a lot of grief. I recently, about a year ago, I moved to this region near Mount Shasta. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's about an hour from the Oregon border. I'm surrounded by a lot of white supremacy. I'm not totally experiencing it um, in my face, but I know that it's present when I drive down the street and I see Farmers for Trump um, brochures and posters about how COVID is a hoax and, just a lot of reminders of where I live. I'm in a completely beautiful place. And I've always been an urban person. And now I live in the wilderness. And though I've been really aware and active in the state of affairs in our lives, in our government, in our climate, in our environment, this move has brought me into closer relation to all of my relatives, all of my relations, to the lake, to the water on the streams that are flowing down from the snow melts of Mount Shasta and the Eddies, which is a mountain range that goes all the way into Oregon, watching the white Canadian pelicans land on the lake and then watching the lake disappear. Every winter, the lake fills up, and from the snow melt off of the mountains. And then big agriculture siphons the water off of the lake to feed, to grow grass, to feed the cows. And eventually the cows will be grazing where the lake was until the next cycle. I'm living with bats, little tiny bats, just little bitty things. And how do I live with them harmoniously? So I am really experiencing the environment and climate, the fear sometimes that shows up when I go to the grocery store. I'm rubbing very intimately up against the realities of this experience. And for the most part, I lean into the beautiful qualities and I'm not so affected. But for the last few days, this has been rumbling inside me. And it was a felt sense inside me that was coming up into my throat. And I've come to recognize that as me pressing down on what is really weighing on my heart, something that we're conditioned to do so that we can continue to be in the world and do the things that we need to do so that we can continue to create our lives. And at the same time, it's so necessary for us to turn our face towards the things that we would not see, the things that are difficult, the things that we're holding under the surface. And at the same time, on top of that, it's important for us to use our practice and the resources that our practice offers us so that when we tap into those spaces that are unpleasant, that are horrendous, that are horrible, that are uncertain, that are fearful. And I know that we all have them. It's so important for us to be able to resource ourselves in a way that does not drop us down into the mire. And that fear of dropping down, fear of depression, apathy, those kinds of fears really, when we succumb to them, we're never able to face those parts of ourselves that are there under the surface. Our practice allows us to embrace, to understand that there are 10,000 sorrows and 10,000 joys, and that all of it makes us who we are. We practice loving kindness and compassion, not as ways to avoid or to deter us, or as spiritual bypasses, but we practice them in order to be able to be resilient. Walking the middle path of our practice is like walking a tightrope, requiring diligence, commitment, ardency. It's a fine line. And so it is with all that we are confronted with. So rising up into the beautiful qualities of our life, those things that bring us joy, the gratitude, the appreciation, is really a medicine, a necessary medicine to keep us moving along this path, to give us the strength and resiliency to face all of who we are and all that is out there, to decondition our minds and our hearts away from hatred, away from the conditioning of revenge, away from clinging, attachment, and away from all of the ways that we delude ourselves or distract ourselves. So mindfulness is really an excavation. It's really a dropping down into all of our conditioning and turning it over. Every piece of us What are our inclinations and our habits of mind? Why do we make the decisions that we make? What motivates them? And where do we get that conditioning from? What our ethics are based upon, what they're grounded in. These are the teachings that we cultivate within our practice to have wise understanding, to know and understand that there is suffering and we are experiencing it in ways that we would never have thought. The turning of the tide back from all of the strides made forward for equity, for inclusion, for equality, for freedom. All of the distractions that are placed before us that make it easy to turn our faces away, to lean away from the monumentality of what we're up against. The overarching practice is that of mindfulness. And mindfulness is an excavation. In our practice, when we are in silence, in whatever posture we're in, we're not just bringing our focus to an object, but we're turning it over. We're looking at the process of that object. If it's the breath, we're looking at how long is the breath or how short is it? Or what is the temperature as it enters the body? And how does it change as it exits? What is the cadence of it? Where do we feel it? How does it change over time? This is the excavation so necessary for us to have the resilience to do in our very lives, to decolonize our minds, to notice our habits, to discern what is life-giving and what is life-sabotaging, and ultimately to confront with all of our being, with all of our feeling, what it is that we're up against in the world. You know, one of the things that came to me that I'm not going to elaborate on is, maybe the teaching right now is about how to really let go of all that we know and all of our comforts and our expectation that life is going to go on. Maybe the teaching is about really turning our faces in that direction. And not in a way that is morbid or morose, but just in a way that is really facing reality and bringing in the beauty of our practice to hold us in that. We talk about the climate, we talk about the death of our planet, we protest, we talk about the killings in our communities, we protest. And it's so monumental and so deeply embedded and ingrained in our institutions and in our culture. And it's living in our bodies. The pain and the grief and the disappointment and the anxiety is living in our bodies up under the surface. And for me, the last few days, it has come all the way full circle, fully to my awareness. So I spend part of this day looking at my practice. There was one point where I felt, I've been practicing so long. Why am I in this place? Where's my equanimity? But it got me. I was all broke down today. And then I remembered the gratitude of my breath, that every disappointment and every joy is part of my growth, is part of my way to climb out. That I'm in an apprenticeship with grief and pain, and that I must learn how to transform it because it's here. It's here in this world. It's the first noble truth that there is suffering. So, a big part of our practice, besides the foundation of non harming, is really to be able to hold what's in both hands, the suffering and the joy, and to remember, not as a cultural bypass, but to remember to turn towards those things that have lifted us, our children. Nature is always there for us. Not only is nature there for us, but we are nature, a part of nature. The earth, the air that we breathe, our spiritual friends that keep us on the path. And one of the biggest gifts for me to remember is that I have this practice. How did I find it? How did I find this? So beautiful. I don't know where I would be today with all that's happening without it. It's teaching me how to love myself, how not to blame myself for the conditions that are in my life. It's teaching me how to pluck out the hatred through my metta practice. How not to blame and shame, how to have compassion, even for those who are perpetrating harm. Ooh, hard, hard. That's part of that little tightrope I was telling you about. Hard. Has written in the chat, suffering. Colorism in the United States is rooted in slavery and is the product of a sickness created by racism. Lighter slaves were more favored than darker slaves, though all slaves were dehumanized nonetheless. And can you comment on this suffering? It's a deep suffering. And forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Iji. It's a suffering that is not only a suffering, but it's a conditioning. It is a conditioning that we still carry with us. It's a generational trauma. And our practice is one way to help us decondition it. It comes along with a lot of self-hatred, of living and misunderstanding and not knowing why our situation is as it is. So much has come to light recently in the last 50 years of understanding why it is that we've carried so much self-hatred. And that's one of the things that we must turn our awareness towards and use our compassion and loving kindness practices as medicine and bring ourselves into full self-regard. Thank you for that wisdom. And I'm so glad you brought that in because it brings up, it brings to mind that there is a deep intuitive knowing that has no words, that lives within us all and is everywhere around us. And in some ways, our conditioning has severely cut so many of us off from that. And it's the place where the necessary creativity lies for us to be able to address whatever we're up against. And there's some mystery in that and some darkness in that that we tend to be afraid of. And really allowing ourselves to walk into the unknowing, walk into the mystery, and know that within those mysterious dark places that there's some wisdom to be found because it's within us. So I want to thank you for bringing that forward. You know, it is another conditioning. I mean, there's so much to be excavated. There's no time to waste. We're conditioned to compartmentalize, to to have this separateness, this sense of separateness. We even compartmentalize our practice. I'm meditating when I'm sitting on the cushion or when I'm doing this. And then when I'm off of that, I'm doing something else. But mindfulness moves through. There is no compartmentalization. We are integrative beings. There's no separation. There is no separation between all of us. There's no space between us. There's no separation between us and the earth. So that conditioning to compartmentalize is a poison. And I'm not speaking, to your what you're saying about compartmentalizing. I'm saying that on a global level, that it's poisonous to our very being. And which is one of the reasons why the Buddha talks about spiritual friendships. One of the reasons why the Sangha is the next Buddha, as noted by Thich Nhat Hanh, because there is no separation. And so, one of the invitations that I present to all of you is to look deeply in your hearts, in your actions, in your behaviors, in your words, how you might be promoting separateness, because it's all in our language. I mean, is it possible to take the I out of the language? So I just wanted to, you touched a button in me with that compartmentalization, Bridget. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of things in here. I'm going to just read through a couple of these things because we are coming very close up on our time. Connecting to my ancestor, Earth, remembering she's gone through many extinctions. We are Earth. Yeah. That's something to always remember. I turn to my ancestors who have survived and silently placed their legacy in me without holding on to guilt, fear, or judgment. Beautiful, beautiful. And to also know that our ancestors aren't out there somewhere. They live within us. They're in our DNA. They're flowing through our bloodstream. We carry them with us. I don't understand the word favored when discussing colorism and American slavery. I don't understand that word either. I think there's a larger context that statement comes in, but thank you for offering it. I believe darker folks were favored for outdoor labor and lighter folks for indoor work. We are using the word favored to describe something beyond this. Yeah, and I think lighter folks who worked in the big house were lighter for a reason, which has a lot to do with, rape and what have you. Trusting the process of letting go. And that touches into understanding that there's nothing to be gained from our practice, that our practice is a practice of renunciation, of letting go, of surrendering, and letting go of all of this conditioning, all of it, because it's all upside down. If you're white, you're right. If you're brown, stick around. 60 years ago, Big Bill Brunzi sang about America's Jim Crow system. If you is white, you's all right. If you's brown, stick around. But if you's black, brother, get back, get back, get back, get back. Recent events indicate that Jim Crow didn't die. It mutated, yes. As a result, many Black citizens still find themselves sitting at the back of the opportunity bus. Yeah. Oh, there's three more. When we celebrate victories, we often forget that we have not turned all adversaries into allies. It's not a done deal. There will almost always be fierce, sustained pushback. Thank you. I take on difficult issues in small pieces so that I am not overwhelmed. Beautiful. So we have definitely come to our moment. I would like to thank you all for joining me this evening. And I will offer the dedication of merit now. And I want to say that today we have generated good deeds that entitle us to a spiritual reward. As an act of generosity, we offer the merit generated from our actions today to radiate outward into the world at large and to land upon and rest with those who are less fortunate than we are. May it reach its long tentacles through the illusion of space between all that there is and defeat the enemy of wrongdoing. May it land in the hearts and minds of those who are steeped in suffering, those who are stalked and hunted, those who are hungry and imprisoned in the trance of ignorance. We offer the fruits of our merit to all living beings. May we all be free from suffering. Thank you for your practice and your presence. Be well. Take care.